Hello, everyone. Welcome to Nurses in Charge. This is a special broadcast, and I just want you to know that this is all about Nurses in Charge. A lot of people want to know what is Nurses in Charge? What are you doing, Kasey? Where is this organization going? What is it all about? Stay tuned, and we will be right with you. Welcome, everybody. I am simultaneously broadcasting. My name is Kasey Pacheco. I am the Executive Director of Nurses in Charge. And I came on this morning just to share some clarity in my own Kasey way of what Nurses in Charge really is about. So, if you have been following Nurses in Charge and you're wondering what is this nonprofit organization about, how are they different from every other organization? I am here to explain that today. If you are looking in at the replay, if you have any questions, if you have any comments, please be sure to leave it below and we will get to it one by one. Okay, so sometimes my writing is not as clear as I would like it to be. So one of my advisors told me, Kasey, just draw what you're trying to say. And I know this might be really elementary, but I had to draw it because this movement is so very important. It's important for nurses, it's important for healthcare. And sometimes I think even my own nurses don't fully understand what we're doing. And I need them to understand what this movement is about. So here you go, my drawing. Okay, so let me know. I'm on two screens here, but I'm trying to be as clear as possible. So this is my little diagram that I brought up. So nurses in charge. I wish it was nicer, but this you got to start somewhere, right? So nurses in charge. First of all, nurses in charge is not a nursing association. There are many nursing associations out there. Each state, most countries, they have one and they are doing their job. They're doing more than their job. We are in a state where nursing, the profession, is at a crisis, especially since COVID 19. And we are, if you can see it here, we are what you call pioneer nurses. Now, you might say pioneer nurses. What's pioneer nurses? So, if I tell you I'm a nurse coach, most times that refers to a nurse coaching a patient to wellness. A pioneer nurse, I'm giving you a definition here. A pioneer nurse is a nurse that takes care of other nurses. It is branded, it is defined by Dr. Niampu. A pioneer nurse is a nurse who takes care of other nurses. It could be for money, it could be for free, it could be that's just who you are and you've always done it, you've always looked out for your other nurses. That's who we would call a pioneer nurse. Now, Nurses in Charge is formed from a team of pioneer nurses. So, my glare is coming in. If you could see, this pioneer nurse is it's made up of individual nurses, nurses in the local community. You have local business people in the community, local nonprofits, retired nurses, volunteers, health and wellness coaches. Basically, pioneer nurses are the ones who say, listen, my nurses are in trouble. The nurses I work with, the nurses in the community, the nurses in the state. And I'm taking a little bit of a different approach from a nurse association. So a nurse association, usually they go to hospital administration, they go to government and policymakers, and they're really fighting for nursing as a profession. Pioneer Nurses says, hey, we have some problems in our nursing community, and it's just about our culture. It's about we need a holistic approach to take care of the shortage of nursing. So, together, we're going to pull together a group of people who, they kind of care if nurses exist in our society. And together, they are coming together because they realize that they are directly affected by the state of healthcare. Some people became, they're concerned, they're wondering what's going on when they're waiting for long times, when they don't have enough care or the care is lacking. They get scared, so they want to know, what could I do to become involved? These people here will never become part of the nurses association. Most of them wouldn't be part of a nurse association, because the nurse association, it's just their focus is a little bit different. So these people we are inviting to become part of Nurses in Charge, right? And together, we are here to serve the direct care providers. Okay, let me go to my next slide. I'll come back to this one in a bit. So, as Nurses in Charge, we have what we call the NIC Connector Program. The NIC Connector Program is what Nurses in Charge, it's our way of reaching the frontline nurses. Now, I wanted to explain this a little bit. You see, the frontline nurses, a lot of people, if you're not in the nursing world, you might not know this very clearly. But between the frontline nurses and nursing leadership, so you have facility administrators, hospital administrators, and school faculty, what you may not know is that between these two, sometimes they don't get along. Sometimes it's really difficult because they don't see eye to eye. We're not going to get into that today. We're just acknowledging that sometimes there is a discrepancy between the frontline direct care providers and hospital administration or school faculty. Then you have your CNAs, your techs, your aides. You also have your nursing students. This is what I like to call the nursing pipeline, because these are the people we are looking at to become nurses. Your nursing students, we're hoping that our techs and our CNAs, our aides, some of them go on to become nurses. We are looking for this pipeline to be robust, and so people can filter and keep going up the ladder. Now, what happens is sometimes there might be a little bit of discrepancy. Now, I think techs and aides, nurses love them, but the difference between here and here, back in the day, most techs, aides, nursing students, they kind of looked up and they admired what was happening with the frontline nurses, and this moved them to want to become a nurse. Well, what we're seeing with all the shortages that are happening is that people who are serving as students, aides, they get into the hospital setting, they get into school, and they start realizing that, hey, this is really, they're not really being treated well. The nurses are really frustrated. The culture is kind of toxic. So, what's happening is that they do their job, but they're not really fighting to become nurses because it's kind of a negative thing right now. So, this relationship right here between the pipeline and the actual nurses on the front line. This is strained as well. Now, what is happening? And let me just get out of the glare a little bit. So what is happening is a lot of people are coming out of the system. They're on the front line and they're coming out and they say, you know what? I have a solution. I have a problem. I see what's going on and I want to help. And a lot of them, they're innovating new products. They have products to serve nurses. They have different services they want to provide. You have businesses in the tech industry. They are doing innovations, they're making apps, they're doing amazing things. But what happens is a lot of this innovation doesn't come right back to the frontline nurses. Why? Because when the innovation goes, most times they go over here to the nursing administration. And these are the people who vet whether this is going to come down to the frontline nurses. Now, just in business, that's kind of a good way to go because these people can actually pay for your services and these people can actually, they have access, right? They have access to a whole bunch of nurses. But what I'm here showing you today is that even though they have access to nurses, you see, nursing is a very interesting profession. Nurses, even though you can get nurses to work for you, you can pay them very well. That does not, because you have to capture them in a meeting or a room, it does not mean that you have their heart. So even if you come out with every time you have a new policy or a new procedure, I'm telling you, I've been a nurse for a long time, you get to the frontline nurses and you want to initiate it, it never has quite the success that it could have had if it went from innovator straight to the frontline nurses because it passed through administration and because it went through their process. By the time it comes to the frontline nurses, it becomes one more thing on your task list, one more to-do list. And a lot of times it is not very effective in helping the overall problem of the frontline nurses. So what Nurses in Charge, what we're doing is that we are creating a direct path to the frontline nurses. And it's not that we are disrespecting administration. It's not that we are ignoring faculty. It's we're saying we're coming from the place of peership. We're coming as pioneer nurses. We're coming as nurses who want to stimulate this section here. We want to stimulate the frontline nurses. We want to let them know we know where you are. We know what you've been through. We know the struggles that you are having. And there is help out there. We're here to stimulate the students and stimulate the techs and say, we know, we understand it looks like a frustrating role, but this is actually why we need you here. We actually need you in the profession more than ever before, because if you want to leave to go to a different industry, you can innovate right within nursing and actually evolve the profession. So we're here to show them a different way, something different from what they've seen. Now, you might be saying, Kasey, what on earth? This, I have never seen this done before. How are you going? Where is the money coming from? How are you going to get this supported? Well, if you look down here, there are three buckets I have here, right? Let me bring it closer. Sorry, Nurses in Charge, you're getting some glare. You have some three buckets here. You see nursing community, you see local community, and you see global community. So these people, if you see right next to them, you have dollar signs. Well, it may not be as much as the actual administration, but what these people, the global community, the local community, and the nursing community, what they have in common is that they are affected. They realize, you know what? If we lose our nurses, this is really going to affect our community. For nurses, the less, if you don't have enough nurses, you're going to have more patients to take care of. Eventually, if you have so much, you wouldn't be able to bear it by yourself. So you are affected. For the local community, if you don't have enough nurses in that pipeline, you will be affected. You will be affected when you go to the hospital. Maybe you take your loved one to the hospital, something happened, and you are looking at 16, 18, 20 hours wait time. You are affected, right? And then for the global community, right? All around the world, if you hadn't learned from slavery, when one place lacks something and they can just go, people would not stay in a bad situation. So there are people in different countries and they are clamoring at the door to come out of there, to give their family a better situation. So that's going to affect your local, the local in different countries, that's going to affect their healthcare system, because when you have all the nurses trying to get out, trying to leave and go to different countries where they get paid better, where they get treated better, then it's going to really affect global healthcare. So what, as nurses in charge, what we're doing is that we're connecting this population of local nurses, local community, and the global community to serve frontline nurses. And we are doing that in the space of connection, because we realize that they are direct caretakers of our population. Okay, so eventually, what we hope to see is that when there's new innovation coming down the pipelines, when you're so frustrated and you say, oh man, I wish somebody would listen to my ideas, or I wish that there was this thing invented to make my life, my charting, my documentation, my everything so much easier. What we're hoping to do is where we have this direct connection to the new, and we can actually bring it to nurses on the front line. That you don't have to wait for these businesses all to filter through faculty or facility administration, but it can come directly to you through pioneer nurses, which is your peers, your nursing peers. Okay, so you might be saying, and I don't want this to be more than 30 minutes because I can always come back and answer questions later. But you might be saying, Kasey, why all of this? Where is this all leading to? Okay, and so this is where my passion really gets stirred. Okay, so today, Dr. Niampu, she is going to New York. She is the founder, Dr. Niampu is the founder of Nurses in Charge. And she is going to talk about trauma, mental health trauma that nurses have been faced with. We have traumas that on the outside. You think about when COVID-19 happened, so many people had to actually had the trauma of watching people's loved one die by themselves, right? That's a lot of trauma, unprocessed trauma. But then you think about the traumas that a person faces. Like for her, she went through a serious war, a civil war in her country, and that's how she came here as a refugee. So a lot of nurses have traumas in their own life, and they have traumas outside. And what we're saying as pioneer nurses, we're saying as nurses in charge, we care about the quality of life. The quality of life for not just our fellow nurses, but also our population. What are we seeing? A lot of nurses, when you look at burnout, sometimes it's not just the times that you work as a nurse, but it's what you are seeing. And I'm telling you, I can't, being a nurse in the community, being a nurse in the hospital, let me share with you some of the things that we are seeing as nurses, right? When you go out into a patient's home. So you're in the hospital, you see patients come in, and some of them, they're homeless, they have serious problems, right? But you do your shift, you pass it on to case management or social worker, and you're done with it, right? But when you come into the hospital, when you go into somebody's home as a nurse, you really see the state of our communities. And these are some of the things you see. You see no food, no caregiver, no money, abuse, poor family systems, lack of mental health resources in the community, right? Or they may have resources, but they might have to wait 3 months before. I mean, just think about it. You're having a mental health episode and you have to wait like 2 to 3 months before you could see a provider. I mean, that's not a good state. And then just overall breakdown in the community. A lot of people are going through spiritual awakenings and they're not part of church families that they used to. You find a lot of isolation. You find a lot of elderly people, they have rifts with family members. So as a nurse, you go in and you're seeing, yes, I'm here to help, and I'm here to help your wound, or I'm here to help your heart. But you realize that all of these things are tied into what we call socio-economic factors. So as nurses in charge, we're here because we say, hey, nurses of themselves have need help with socio-economic factors. And if we can bring the help that nurses themselves need. You know, you go to a hospital and you say, oh, I have this wellness program. And they say, oh, I have an EAP, system or provider. But how many nurses actually use those systems? How many nurses actually take advantage between, they can, sometimes you can't even get a bathroom break, much less to spend time to do an EAP. Some nurses carrying heavy loads, not of just themselves and their families, but extended families who they can't afford just to survive. So there's just a lot of strain on nurses. And as pioneer nurses, as nurses in charge, we say we want to help our fellow nurses because these are some of the things we know they may not have time or access to. And if you give nurses access to resources, especially within the community, their own local community, what does that do for your patients? It empowers your nurse, but it also empowers your patients. Nurses are on the front lines, and they are the ones who, back in the day, nurses used to be in the community. Now there's a disconnect. I don't know if you've been to a health fair, but over here you go to health fairs and there's a bunch of marketers, no nurses, nobody checking their blood pressure, nobody's checking their sugar. They don't have time for that, right? There's a disconnect between the nurses and the community. So with nurses in charge, what our aim to do is to connect not just nurses, but nurses back with the community, nurses back together, so that nurses could take care of themselves, but they can also have a higher level of care for their patients because we are about healing the healers. So some people might say, oh man, they may come into nurses in charge and they may think, oh, I'm ready to move policy. I'm ready for something to happen big. But as nurses in charge, as pioneer nurses, nurses who take care of nurses, we say that could be every nurse, whether it's on your unit, whether it's in your community, you can take action. You don't have to wait for someone to delegate it to you. You can actually rise up, be in charge, and say, this is a plan, this is what I've come up with. And I'm tapped into a global community of nurses who will support me, who will review, who will toss ideas with me, help me find the funding, help me find the resources to actually go into action. So I just had my little diagram here. This is very, very dear to my heart. I think not only nurses should know who we are, I think the community should know who we are so that they can embrace us when we come, and they can actually look for ways, because a nursing shortage in any community affects everyone. So I thank you so much. If you've been with us, thank you for being with us. Today starts a fundraiser. It's going to go from October 2nd, all the way to the end of December. And this fundraiser it's supposed to build up to 2025, because 2025 marks 5 years since the COVID pandemic. And a lot of nurses, they've been through so much that they never had a chance to unpack and share their stories. So the fundraiser is called Uncharted Narrative. And this is where nurses are invited to share their stories all around the world of what they went through, how other nurses helped them to actually get through the pandemic, and then maybe other people who maybe have nurses in their family that passed during that time can share their stories with the world as far as what these people did. During the pandemic, they said heroes, but then everybody went back to their own normal life. So we welcome those who have lost co-workers or lost loved ones to really share their story as far as how they inspired them and how their legacy is going to live on. Um, So look out for that uncharted narrative. We look forward to hearing your story. Um, and if you know of any nurse that maybe inspired you, helped you to get where you are in life, but it's been a while and you've been out of contact with them, we are doing a social media side of Uncharted Narrative where on the social media side, we want you to find them. Find them on Facebook, find them on LinkedIn, tag them and tell them how much they inspired you. And we have you using the quote hashtag Pioneer Nurse 2025. So hashtag Pioneer Nurse 2025. We'll be talking more about this during the month of October because this is something that we really want to just love bomb nurses with. We just want to inundate nurses all around the world with love and appreciation. And even if you're not a nurse, you could donate. Our grand prize winners will be getting a Caribbean nut cruise. It's a trip. It's an actual trip. It's an all-inclusive to a Caribbean destination, and it's absolutely beautiful. So we will be sharing more about the grand prize. But if you're not a nurse, you could still participate in the fundraiser. You could still share your story about how you were touched by a nurse. It's $5